What if I told you there's a scenario where the ACC gets 0 teams into the college football playoff?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode of Locked On ACC, we'll talk about Super League proposals, Project Rudy, why it's very unlikely to happen. I already see Kenton rolling his eyes. We'll talk about the ACC players of the week, biggest remaining games on the ACC schedule. And Kenton, these games are going to mean a little extra something because I'll be honest, I didn't know until earlier today that Power 4 conferences are not guaranteed to get their champion in. I had thought heading into this new frontier we're in of the 12-team playoff that it was automatic that, whoever wins the SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, that the conference winners are automatically in. I didn't know till today, Kenton, that wasn't actually the case.
Yeah, I mean, we all were told and believed that it was Power 4 plus the highest remaining. Lo and behold, it's just highest remaining to start off with, and we assumed it would be the Power 4. However, I do want to say this. There is not a world this year. I'm not going to say there's not a world, period, where one of the ACC teams is not one of the best 12 in America, because that's possible. Same way it's possible at SEC, same way it's possible for the Big 10, same way it's possible for the Pac-12, or not Pac-12, Big 12, RIP Pac-12. We hardly knew ye to, not have one of the best, or yes, one of the best 12 teams in the nation. It's possible, but this ain't the year. This ain't the year. Every single team that you point out in the ACC and say they have this defect, they have that defect, you can point at a team in one of the two big dog conferences in terms of the ACC or the SEC and the Big 10 in the same vein. Right. So, I think that it's misguided, foolhardy, and just downright stupid to say, oh, the ACC doesn't have one of the best 12 teams in the nation, because, again, if they're not, who is? Who is?
Right.
If that's your case, then you're also arguing that one conference not only has a concentration of the best 12 teams in the nation, or 6 of the best 12, whatever the case may be, you're also arguing that it's okay to lose 1/4 of your games because you're in a tough conference, which I think is it's downright moronic.
So here's how the scenario hypothetically could play out. Saturday Blitz wrote an article about this saying, hey, there's this belief that the ACC and Big 12 champion have an automatic bid to the playoff, but that's not true. And I verified this. No conference champion actually gets an automatic qualifying bid. It's actually the 5 highest ranked conference champions. And that's where the danger lies. They say if, say, Army and Boise State win out, or Tulane wins out with a victory over Army, we could be set up for an interesting final poll to determine what 5 teams will get bids to the playoff, not just the 4 first-round buys, but also the chance to get to the playoff altogether. And Kenton, I won't run through the Big 12 scenario because this is Locked On ACC, but here's what could happen in the ACC. Basically, this would involve Clemson, playing a spoiler, but also picking up another loss before they get to the ACC championship. They say, while Miami is set up well in the rankings, both SMU and Clemson are in volatile places heading down the stretch if they were to lose one. Clemson, 7-1 in the ACC, is already finished with conference play, but the Tigers still play South Carolina to close out the season. Let's say by some miracle, Clemson gets to the ACC championship game, which could happen with 1 Miami loss or 2 SMU losses, or a crazy scenario involving Louisville and Virginia swapping places in conference standings along with an SMU loss to Virginia, and the Tigers win in Charlotte, they say, but the week before they lose to South Carolina. Clemson would then be sitting at 10-3, likely well behind an Army and Boise State in the college football playoff rankings. would a win over Miami or SMU be enough to bolster the Tigers into one of those top 5 conference championship spots with Army, Tulane, and Boise State looming? Only time would tell. Now, to answer that question, Kenton, I would like to think that even if, Clemson were to lose to South Carolina, if they were then to beat, an 11-1 SMU team in the conference championship game and be crowned ACC champions, I would think that would be good enough to get into the playoff.
Here's my thing. Even if Clemson is deemed not good enough because they lose to South Carolina or whatever the case may be, last time I checked, there isn't a mandate for your conference champion to get in. If there's no mandate for your conference champion to get in what world do you argue that both Miami and SMU are that bad, are not good enough, have not earned
Great point.
it?
Yeah.
Like, even if you were to say, hey, Clemson just has too many losses in too many bad spaces, they've shown us who they are against top teams time and time again. What has SMU shown you? What, a 3-point loss? Now, wait a minute, Donald. Hold on. I feel like I'm having the reverse of what used to happen on That's So Raven. Because remember, on that show, she used to see the future, but it was kind of murky. I think I'm seeing the past.
I'm too old for that. So Raven, but you continue.
My God. Here we
I'm
go.
40.
Here we
man.
go.
You think I was watching that? I was like 17 when that show was out.
That's fair. That's fair. You were not the target demographic. But let me ask you this, Donald. So last time I checked, Oregon beats Ohio State by 3 points or so, and that matters a lot, right? That matters. That's a thing that but not that much because we both knew both teams were going to get in, right?
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, BYU beat Oregon by 3 points. I'm sorry, beat SMU by 3 points.
Yeah, SMU. Yeah.
BYU was undefeated up until this week. Why should that loss be exponentially worse to the point where if you lose one more game, you're cooked? Because you and I both know, even if Ohio State loses another game and does not get to the Big Ten championship, they're getting in. They're
yes,
in.
I agree.
So why are we not exercising that same thought with SMU here? I would love to know. I would love for somebody to explain it to me like I'm a 7-year-old.
I would love that explained to me as well. I think one thing that's been very clear is there's heavy favoritism towards the SEC and to a lesser degree the Big Ten. And Kenton, you were warning people about this with the SEC, by the way, because you know that that account that for a while was hitched to the Florida State wagon, and then I think he kind of jumped off that because Florida State's the biggest national embarrassment. But he tweets all the time about the Big Ten, which a lot of good information comes from that account, the Big Ten information account. But like I see him, like probably rightfully so, complaining about the SEC favoritism. He's a Big Ten guy. And you're right, like the SEC and Big Ten, they were talking about forming some alliance. The SEC's probably realizing we even need the Big Ten. An alliance with you guys, we're straight.
Everybody has agreed that both of these teams are the best team because are the best conferences because they are the best conferences. Everybody sits up here and screams and yells and moans about how we are the only good conferences and we're the good conferences because we beat ourselves. Well, that doesn't quite pass the snuff test with me. I've told everybody ad nauseum for years about what Penn State is, who they are, who they always will be. And yet, every year we continue to prop them up, Weekend at Bernie style, regardless of how good or bad they look, and say, "Oh, look, they beat Indiana, they beat Washington, they beat Iowa, they beat Wisconsin. What a team! They beat Rutgers, Dono, Rutgers, the Fighting Gracianos. What a time!" We prop them up and pretend like they're good every year. That doesn't happen in the ACC. The ACC doesn't get that same love, that same credit, that same, hey, your team is important and special just because you have run the table or done enough, and you only have one loss to the champions in this conference. The ACC doesn't get that love. It doesn't. The fact that we're even discussing SMU possibly being out, a team with a loss that not only is a one-possession loss, the only difference in the point spread between Oregon, Ohio State, and BYU, SMU is 2 points. Ohio State lost by 1 point. BYU beat SMU by 2. Oh, okay. So now those 2 points must be all the difference in the world. They must be all the difference in the world. Again, it's foolishness. The ACC has proven it. The ACC has shown it. And here's my biggest gripe. What SEC team doesn't also have glaring weaknesses? What Big
They
Ten
all do.
team doesn't also have? I would say Ohio State and Oregon are probably the only teams that I'm like,
Yeah,
you struggle to find a weakness, but even with others,
Oregon
so.
struggled against a very mid Wisconsin team.
And I was about to say, the Oregon's biggest weakness is the fact that they know that how good they are, so they never really
Yeah.
turn it off. They always look like they're sleepwalking through every game. Barely beat Idaho. Barely beat Boise State. How can you barely beat Idaho and then beat Ohio State? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Again, strength of schedule is so interesting to me, and I see it pop up so much. But I want to know how we determine who's who beyond preseason polls. Because preseason polls are all based on speculation, what we think, what we thought. Sure, the U.S.'s economy is backed up on speculation and debt. College football shouldn't be. That's why we're
I agree with that.
keep private equity out, because we don't want it based on speculation and debt.
Yeah.
So for our playoff to be decided that way is downright nasty.
Yeah, no doubt. But we have a lot more to get to on this episode of Locked On ACC, including with 2 regular season weeks left. Biggest remaining games on the ACC football schedule, whether it be great rivalries, college football playoff implications. In fact, I got a question about what's normally a great rivalry. This particular game might feel completely irrelevant once we get to it. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, Locked On ACC fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app. You've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they're revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers from your favorite school. Roy is helping us keep our team intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. We've had so many memorable moments this year on Locked On ACC, which players we've given Roy Player of the Week to, when Xavier Restrepo broke all those Miami receiving records and on a single catch in a single game. That was a great moment. And we deposited a little appreciation in his account earlier this season. To do that, you can download the Roy app. You can see what the logo looks like if you're watching us on YouTube. So make sure you see that logo, or go to joinroy.com. Now, let's spotlight the Roy and Locked On Player of the Week for this week. Amarian Hampton of North Carolina. I mean, he absolutely ran wild. 244 rushing yards this past week against Wake Forest and a touchdown on 35 carries. A career high 244 rushing yards for the best running back in the ACC. Amarian Hampton is our Roy Player of the Week, and I would say that's pretty well deserved on his part. So we're going to throw some money into his account on Roy. Every contribution counts, 10, 20 bucks. It all adds up, and it's going to help your favorite players stay put. Join us and show some love for Amarian Hampton this week. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. We're also proudly brought to you by Game Time here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Oh, my goodness, my friends. We're getting the best deals on tickets. This is the only ticket app that Kenton and I use. The prices actually go down the closer you get to the event, which is incredible. There's a new feature on Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, because Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Other features that I love on the Game Time app: I can get a panoramic view from my seat in the app right before I buy. The all-in pricing feature is amazing. It shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Kenton, when I was teasing if this particular rivalry game doesn't mean much this year. I was not talking about North Carolina versus NC State. Don't worry, that's not the one I was talking about. Because remember, final week of the season, Kenton, annual matchup between Florida and Florida State. Now, I will give Florida credit because they've been trending way up recently. DJ Lagway is a bona fide star at quarterback. Billy Napier a couple weeks ago got the vote of confidence, but it might have actually been a real vote of confidence and not like, hey, we'll endorse you now, we'll fire you later. It seems like, Florida's actually trending up, but then on the other side of that rivalry, this is one of the better rivalries in college football historically. Florida State doesn't care. Like, Florida State is 1-9 on the season. They've got Charleston Southern this weekend. They'll win, but I don't think they're going to cover a 33.5-point spread against Charleston Southern. And I think Florida State's going to get blown out by Florida. So that's a game that we usually care about every single year. Like, do I have any reason to think that what's normally one of the biggest games involving an ACC team, that game's not going to be meaningful whatsoever this year, Kenton?
Oh, it's absolutely not going to be meaningful this year. And I want to get into something real quick here about this game, okay? Florida State and Florida, LinkedIn Billy has saved his job, and I'm sure all the other SEC coaches are dancing in the streets about it. I'm sure they are. But this 1-9 Florida State team, why would anybody care? Why would they? This team doesn't care. They've packed it up. They've given up. They have given in. They have no-mossed the season. They don't care anymore. And are they covering 33.5? Well, just a really quick moment about that. What's their high score on the year, Dono?
21 points.
21 points. And somehow they're going to cover 33.5? I don't. And mind you, that 21 was them at their peak when they believed like, oh, we're going to go back to the playoff and all that. That was it. Their latest offensive performances, let's look at these absolute master classes that team has put on, shall we? We're looking at a grand total in their past, I want to say about 4 to 5 games. We're looking at a grand total of about 20 points. So in what world you look at 3 points against Notre Dame, 11 against Florida State, 14 against Miami, 16 against Duke. Do you realize you have to combine their last 4 game scores to get over the threshold of 33? Like, what are we doing here? Their last 3 games combined, those boys have put up 28 points. I'm sorry. I have a hard time believing that their offense is now not only going to dominate, they're going to hang a 40 burger on them boys. Yeah, all right. I believe you. I believe you for sure.
So this one, now, okay, how much does this mean to you? Another game we look at on the, and let me say one more thing though about the Florida State versus Florida game. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to mean a big something to Florida because for as well as Florida's been playing in recent weeks, I don't think they're going to beat Ole Miss this weekend. I think Ole Miss is going to beat Florida this weekend, which would mean when they face Florida State, they're going to be going for their 6th win and bowl eligibility. It's going to be easier than going up against a bye week, but the game will mean something for Florida. For Florida State, it's just they threw in the towel many weeks ago. Now, what about this one? This coming weekend, actually, you don't even have to wait till the final week for this. Cal versus Stanford. Kenton, I have been, for the better part of my life, I've missed very few Cal versus Stanford games, even when, neither team is particularly good. It's one of the oldest rivalries in college football, for so many years, of course, under the Pac-10 and the Pac-12 banner. I know neither team is particularly good. Stanford just came off a huge win over Louisville, though. It's a huge collapse by Louisville. But still, like that rivalry means something, and I am excited to watch it. But like, how surreal is it going to be watching ACC logos on a Cal versus Stanford game? And how big is that game to you, if at all?
First thing first, every rivalry means something, regardless of if it's a mid-off or not. Even if it's 2-10 against 1-11, if you hate each other, if that hate is deep in your heart, if that disdain, that disgust, that, as some people said, their rivals, that pity is in your heart for real, it's always going to mean something. But How much does it mean to me personally? Not much. I mean, let's be honest here, right? These are two teams that I don't think either one of them has a shot at becoming bowl eligible
No,
at this point.
Cal has 5 wins, so Cal
Hmm.
can get bowl eligible this weekend. Stanford cannot. They've got 7 losses.
Oh, okay. Well, I stand corrected. My bad, Lawrence Ross, Cal super fan. You know, you're my guy. You know, I'm sorry. My fault, G. But in all seriousness, I absolutely don't think this game matters that much. I mean, I don't really look at this game and say like, oh man, like this is one of those ones that'll shape the ACC future for years to come, because it won't. It objectively will not. And so with that in mind, I look at this game and I don't really see too much there. But again, I'm not involved in that rivalry in a meaningful way. It's just like you said about, hey, I'm not talking about NC State UNC. Well, let's talk about it. What does that game mean to anybody outside of the triangle? UNC just barely bowl eligible. NC State fighting for bowl eligibility. What does that mean nationally? Nobody really cares. Nobody's looking at that game to say like it means everything. But to the people involved in it, it does mean everything. By the way, NC State, please don't let me down. I got to wear a wide receiver's jersey who played for the Dirty Foot Club if y'all lose. So please, I'm begging you, put William out of his misery in a very impolite way.
Now you see what you did. I'm going to be rooting for Mac Brown now because I want to.
Wow.
You got to wear that jersey on the show. I want to see Kenton Gibbs wearing a wide receiver jersey locked on ACC.
I said no such thing. I made no such agreement that I would wear it on the show. Now, will I wear it at my current place of employment? I'm a man of my word.
Okay, let me strike a deal with you. You don't have to wear it on the show, but you do have to send me a picture of you wearing it at work so I can put it on the screen for the YouTubers.
All right.
Can you do that?
How about this? I will send you a picture of me in the jersey if NC State loses. I will send.
That's all I ask. Just so I can put it on the screen. That's all I ask.
I'll send a picture. I'm not wearing it for the whole show. I'm not doing that.
No, you don't have to.
I'll send you a picture. I'll do that.
That's all that I need. Now, I mean, I would argue that probably the biggest remaining game on the ACC regular season schedule, it's going to be Miami at Syracuse final week of the season because that's assuming Miami takes care of business against Wake Forest at home this week. You know, my Hurricanes are favored by 24 points, I think, now on FanDuel. So it would take an epic collapse for Miami coming off a bye week to lose to Wake Forest. So if Miami wins this week, that matchup against Syracuse has the opportunity to play spoiler. Syracuse, Kenton, when their offense is on, they're one of the more effective units in the country. I mean, you wouldn't believe. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't believe Kyle McCord is one of the leading passers in the entire country right now. When they're on, they are on. But when they're off, it can get really, really ugly. I could say the same thing for Miami's defense, of course. So that game to me will likely decide, whether Miami gets to the ACC championship or not. I think that's the most impactful game left on the regular season schedule. Now, the exception would be, and I don't expect it to happen, but if SMU were to lose this week to Virginia, then their final game against Cal would have their spot on the line. So then that would be a big game. But you know what? SMU probably has a better chance to lose to Virginia than Miami does to Wake Forest. So I guess nothing's impossible, but I'm looking at Miami versus Syracuse final week. It's probably the biggest game we have left this year.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree, because that game is where it all matters, where all of the beans are on the line. You are talking about 2 games with SMU that, like, hey, if you lose this one, then everything is on the line in the next one, as opposed to with Miami. If you lose this one, that's it. You're done. Clemson sneaks in. They tiptoe through the back door into the ACC championship real quiet, like nobody made a sound, nobody gets hurt type of deal, sneaking through the back door there. So, I think that this is absolutely the most impactful game, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about why, there are going to be discussions going on about a future for college football beyond the current TV deals, and maybe one that cuts the NCAA out of the equation. I kind of like for something like this to happen, but it's not going to happen. And here's why. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. So happy to welcome Mint Mobile to the Locked On family. This is an amazing service. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was actually the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with you and all your existing contacts as well. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. So, Kenton, it sounds like chancellors and presidents, a handful of them within the ACC and the Big 12, are receptive to the idea of these private equity super leagues that are getting floated out there. Project Rudy is one of those that we talked about. The CSFL, which is College Student Football League, is another one that would, create these super leagues of, depending on which proposal, 70, 80 teams. You're only playing big opponents. You cut out these FCS matchups. They leverage these alleged big TV deals. And obviously you can understand why, like, certain decision makers and these groups are actually, they're targeting meetings with the presidents and the chancellors because they're the ones who have final say. Like, they want to cut out the middleman. They don't want to meet with the athletic directors who can't make the final decision. They want to sit down with the chancellors and the presidents and the board of trustees and so on. But here's the problem, Kenton, because and I'm sure there are faults, right? For as compelling as these ideas may sound, the SEC and the Big Ten have zero interest in these proposals. Why? Because they have the mega TV deals and they don't need the ACC and the Big 12 and the Group of Five as much as those other parties need them. So these meetings that are going to be happening, I think maybe in December, I was reading on CBS Sports, Dennis Dodd wrote about it. These meetings with Project Rudy and the CSFL, they're going to happen with some decision makers from the Big 10 or the Big 12 and the ACC, not from the Big 10 and the SEC. So I don't see how anything like this could get done if you don't have the Big Two involved in it. So these things, in my opinion, are going to die on the vine.
Oh, absolutely. They're absolutely going to die. And you got to think about it like this. What is the incentive? The ACC and the Big 12 have an obvious incentive to buy into this. There's a very clear incentive. This is not the situation. This is not a situation where a lot of people say, like, oh, there isn't a zero-sum game, or it's not a pie where you take certain slices out and that takes away from other people. No, college football is very much so that. If the pie is made more equitable, the teams who have the leg up right now are de facto giving something away.
Yes.
That is the reality of what this is. These teams are generating more money, more revenue than teams in these smaller leagues have at their disposal, period. That's just what's happening at this moment. So, I mean, of course they're going to down the vine because you're missing, a good chunk of the power players in this game. But again, I would warn the Big Ten, as I have before, you see what's happening already. Indiana all of a sudden is a terrible team and they've beaten nobody, and all of a sudden, do you not think that this may happen again? Do you not think that this is possible to happen in a higher clip? The days of the time where um, players had to go up north because they knew that, like, hey, there are things happening off the field that mean I can't be here in where I'm from. I can't be in Pahokee. I can't be near Miami. I can't be in Texas. I'm from Mesquite, but I got to go to the north in order to know that those days are gone. They were gone before Dono was born. They're not coming back. So, with that in mind, I would warn the Big Ten, hey, friends, y'all may want to look around and kind of take stock of where things are headed and realize, wait a minute, are they arguing for a 3-loss team from that conference to get in? I may need to join the rest of these guys and leave them on their own.
Here's something that here's a quote from Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner. I've studied it a little bit, and I come back to I don't want to dumb down the Southeastern Conference to be part of some Super League notion with 70 teams that some people speculate would happen. He told the Triple Option podcast, he said, quote, they want to be us, and that's on them to figure it out, not on me to bring myself back down to earth. Here's what Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti said last month. I have yet to see a single thing in any plan that contains things that we couldn't do ourselves and do with our Power 4 colleagues, he said. So no interest from the Big Ten and the SEC. A similar thing, Kenton, was proposed to the big European soccer leagues a few years ago. In fact, I think they basically kind of stole that idea and like made it college football centric. There was a proposal for a European Super League, and that proposal died for the same reason this one's going to die. Because
why would the Premier League and the Champions
exactly
what reason do they have?
They're basically the SEC of European soccer, where they have they have great teams, but they also have the best marketing, the best TV deals, and where the Spanish and Italian leagues and maybe the German Bundesliga could benefit from a European Super League. You're taking something away from the Premier League. They had no reason to go along with it.
Listen, I'm not even a soccer guy, and I know what the Premier League is. They don't have any reason. You know what I mean? And the SEC and the Big Ten are very much so those leagues right now to where they can do that. But again, I told everybody a couple years ago, and I stand by this. The Big Ten is in for a rude awakening. They're going to look up and find themselves on the wrong side of this thing very quickly. And, they'll very likely be looking for some help of their own, which, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Fox will keep them up forever. And I'm like, sure, in theory, it's possible. It's the most likely outcome. I will say that. It is very likely that Fox keeps them up forever, but there's also a world where they don't. And I'll just leave that where it is.
I like it. Well, great stuff as always from Kenton Gibbs. You can check him out at Locked On Wolfpack and on X at TGIF_Kenton. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. Follow me on X at Alex Dono, and we'll talk to you guys again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.